You think you know what people ate in Jesus' time. Paintings show tables covered with wine, fruit, and abundant bread. We imagine warm meals and satisfied families. What if nearly all of that was wrong? What did people actually eat at dawn, at midday, when night fell? And how much of their day was spent just trying to find enough food to survive until morning? Most people in ancient Judea and Galilee didn't eat to feel full. They ate to keep working. The menu barely changed, the portions barely satisfied. And hunger wasn't an emergency. It was expected. What you're about to see isn't the Last Supper. It's an ordinary Tuesday. Stay until the end, because what this reveals about the world Jesus lived in changes how we read everything he said about bread, meals, and daily provision. Morning arrived without breakfast, not as we know it. No one woke to a prepared meal waiting. No porridge, no eggs. For most families in first-century Galilee and Judea, the day began with work, not food. Animals needed water, fields demanded attention, fires had to be started. Bread dough, if there was flour left, needed kneading before the sun climbed too high. People worked first, eating came later. Some families had a piece of bread left from the night before, hard, dry. It was torn and chewed while standing. Others dipped it in water or vinegar to soften it enough to swallow. This wasn't a meal. It was a pause, a small thing to quiet the stomach before the real labor began. Children were given the smallest portions. Women often ate last, or not at all until evening. Men heading to distant fields might carry a piece of dried bread in their tunic, but many left with nothing. The body learned to work hungry. It had no choice. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher. The first real bite of the day came mid-morning, when initial tasks were finished and the body demanded something more than willpower. This was not a sit-down meal. No table, no gathering. People ate standing, between tasks, or while walking to the next piece of work. A piece of barley bread, dark, dense, coarse, was pulled from a cloth or basket. Sometimes it was dipped in olive oil, more often in vinegar or water. The bread itself was the meal. What came with it was small, a handful of olives, a dried fig if the season had been kind, an onion, raw and sharp. These were not accompaniments. They were the only flavor most people tasted all day. Fishermen near the Sea of Galilee might have a strip of salted fish, dried hard as leather. Farmers inland had less. This mid-morning eating was not about satisfaction. It was about continuation. Enough energy to keep moving until the sun began to fall and the real meal, the only meal that mattered, could finally be prepared. Bread was not one part of the meal. It was the meal. Everything else existed around it, or didn't exist at all. For ordinary people in the time of Jesus, bread provided half of their daily calories, sometimes more. In lean seasons, it provided almost everything. Barley bread for the poor, wheat bread for those with more. The grain had to be ground first, every single day. Women knelt before stone hand mills, two heavy circular stones stacked on top of each other. They poured grain into the center hole and turned the upper stone by hand for hours. The sound of grinding echoed through every village at dawn. Rough flour collected below. It was never fine. Bits of stone broke off during grinding and mixed into the flour. Every loaf contained fragments of rock. Every bite wore down teeth a little more. The flour was mixed with water and salt, nothing else for most families. No yeast. The dough was shaped into flat rounds and baked on a clay dome oven or directly on heated stones. The entire process, grinding, kneading, baking, took half a day before anyone could eat a single piece. And the next morning, it began again. What came with the bread was not variety. It was survival dressed as flavor. Olives, olive oil, onions, garlic, lentils, chickpeas. These formed the backbone of everything that wasn't bread. Olives grew abundant in Galilee and Judea, pressed for oil, cured in brine, dried for storage. A family might have a clay jar of oil that lasted months, a bowl of preserved olives that stretched through winter. The oil wasn't drizzled. It was rationed. A small amount for dipping bread, a bit more for cooking lentils into something softer than leather. Lentils and chickpeas appeared in nearly every evening pot, boiled with water, onion, wild herbs if they could be found. Garlic added sharpness. Salt, when it was available, added everything else. Fish was common only near water, salted, dried, hard enough to last weeks without spoiling. Galilean villagers near the sea ate fish regularly. Inland families almost never did. Meat was rare. A goat slaughtered at Passover, a lamb for a wedding, chicken for the moderately wealthy. Most people lived their entire lives eating meat fewer than 10 times. Cheese and milk appeared occasionally from families who owned goats or sheep, but ownership meant wealth most didn't have. These extras weren't luxury. They were the difference between chronic hunger and slightly less chronic hunger. The real meal happened after sunset, when work finally stopped, when the family could gather without stealing daylight from labor. This was the only time most people sat down to eat together. The fire had been burning since late afternoon. A clay pot sat above it, blackened from years of use. Inside, lentils or chickpeas simmered with water, onion, and whatever else the household could spare. Sometimes wild greens foraged from the hillsides, sometimes a splash of oil, often just salt and heat. The pot cooked slowly. By the time the family gathered, the contents had softened into a thick porridge or thin stew. This was dinner. There were no plates, no bowls for each person. The pot itself sat in the center. Bread was torn by hand, pieces passed to the men first, then the women, then the children. Each person used their bread as a scoop, dipping it into the communal pot, soaking up the warm liquid, eating directly from their hands. No one took more than their share. Everyone knew exactly how much was left. When the pot was empty, the meal was over. No second servings, no snacks waiting afterward. What you ate at sunset had to carry you until mid-morning the next day. Hunger returned before sleep came. That was normal. The body learned not to expect fullness. It learned to function on just enough, and some nights, not even that. While most families dipped barley bread into lentil water, others ate wheat. While peasants rationed olive oil by the spoonful, the wealthy poured it freely. While farmers' children chewed dried fish once a month, elite households served roasted lamb weekly. The gap wasn't subtle, it was a canyon. Wealth determined everything. The poor ate barley because wheat cost twice as much. Barley was coarser, harder to digest, lower in status. Wheat bread marked you as someone who didn't work with their hands, someone whose table included more than survival. The rich ate meat regularly, not just at Passover. Lamb, goat, beef, poultry, roasted or stewed with imported spices, cinnamon, cumin, coriander. They drank wine mixed with water at every meal. The poor drank water, or vinegar mixed with water when the well tasted of mud. Geography created inequality too. Coastal families near the Sea of Galilee had access to fresh fish. Inland villages ate fish only when traders brought salted stock, and only if they could afford it. Jerusalem's upper city had access to everything. Galilean hill villages had access to what grew within walking distance. Honey appeared on wealthy tables, figs, dates, pomegranates in season, nuts, cheese from their own flocks. The poor ate fruit once or twice a year, when harvest allowed, when taxes didn't take it first. The priests and temple elite in Jerusalem feasted on sacrificial portions, meat the common people brought but could not eat themselves. This wasn't occasional. This was systematic. The people who worked the land ate the least of what it produced. The people who controlled the land ate the best of everything. Hunger wasn't a crisis. It was Tuesday. Going to bed with your stomach still tight and empty wasn't something people talked about. It was simply what happened most nights. The body adjusted. It had to. Seasonal shortages guaranteed it. Barley and wheat harvests came once a year. If the rain failed, the harvest failed. If locusts came, entire regions went without. Stored grain had to last until the next growing season, and it rarely did. By late winter, families were scraping the bottom of storage jars, mixing old flour with whatever they could forage, stretching portions thinner each week. Children grew slower than their bodies wanted. Heights we consider normal today were rare then. Malnutrition wasn't diagnosed. It was inherited, passed from mother to child through generations of not quite enough. People aged faster. A 30-year-old farmer looked 50 by our standards. Teeth rotted early from grinding stone fragments mixed into flour. Gums bled from lack of fresh food. Muscles weakened from chronic protein deficiency. This was normal, not tragic, not exceptional, just life. And then the tax collector came. Roman tribute, temple tax, landowners' rent. Each one took grain directly from storage jars, took oil, took whatever small surplus a family hoped would carry them through. What was left had to feed everyone until next harvest. It usually wasn't enough, so people went to bed hungry, woke up hungry, worked all day hungry, and called it an ordinary week. When Jesus said, "Give us this day our daily bread," he wasn't teaching poetry. He was naming the single most desperate concern of every person listening. Bread wasn't symbolic. It was survival. And most people weren't sure they'd have enough tomorrow. Understanding what people actually ate changes how we hear everything Jesus said about food. Every parable about feasts, every miracle involving bread and fish, every shared meal with tax collectors and sinners. These weren't just spiritual metaphors. They were physical realities colliding with radical generosity. When Jesus multiplied loaves and fish, he wasn't performing a magic trick. He was answering the question that haunted every family every single day. Will there be enough? When he ate with outcasts, he wasn't just breaking social rules. He was sharing the one resource people guarded most carefully: food from their own tables. When he said, "I am the bread of life," his audience didn't hear abstraction. They heard him claim to be the one thing they could not live without, the thing they spent half their waking hours trying to secure, the thing that determined whether their children grew strong or stayed small. Food was trust made visible. Sharing a meal meant letting someone dip their hand into your family's pot, into your limited supply, your carefully rationed future. It meant believing there would still be enough after they took their portion. Jesus built his entire ministry around tables, around bread broken and shared, around wine poured out, not because meals were convenient gathering places, but because food was the center of every anxiety, every hope, every fragile plan to survive one more season. The daily grind of hunger, the relentless work to eat, the gap between full and empty. This was the world Jesus entered. And every time he spoke about bread, about feasts, about fathers who give good gifts to their children, his listeners heard him addressing the grinding center of their lives. Not someday, today. This was the daily rhythm of eating for the people who walked the same roads as Jesus. No feast tables, no abundance waiting at the end of hard work. Just bread, oil, lentils, and the constant calculation of whether what remained would be enough. Breakfast didn't exist. Mid-morning brought a piece of barley bread and perhaps an olive. Evening brought the only real meal, a shared pot, torn bread used as a scoop, and the understanding that when it was empty, you were done. Hunger followed you to sleep, woke with you at dawn, walked beside you through every task. This wasn't crisis. This was normal. And it means that every time Jesus spoke about food, about daily bread, about feasts, about fathers who give good gifts, he was speaking directly into the center of their lives, not as metaphor, as reality. When he fed thousands with loaves and fish, he wasn't performing for crowds. He was answering the question that haunted every family every day. Will there be enough? When he shared meals with sinners and outcasts, he wasn't just breaking social boundaries. He was offering the one thing people had protected most fiercely: food from a limited supply. When he said, "I am the bread of life," no one heard poetry. They heard him claim to be the thing they could not survive without, the thing that took half the day to prepare, the thing children cried for when there wasn't enough. Food was survival. Sharing food was trust. And Jesus built everything he taught around tables, around broken bread, around the everyday desperation of people trying to make it to tomorrow. If you want more history from the real world of the New Testament, the kind that changes how you read every parable, every miracle, every meal, subscribe. Because the untold details aren't just interesting. They're the key to understanding what it meant when God became human and sat down to eat with us.